Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Autogefühl with me, AJ. Today, we have a special episode, and that's because I'm here driving in the Krim 21 Youngtimer Rally, and I'm in the last leg, unfortunately, of this rally, so I've driven from Dresden up here to Berlin. But what's more important is the car that I have been driving. It's a 1971 BMW 2002 or 2002, and it's the TII version. So join me today as we take a trip back in time to a place where cars were analog and pure. Are you interested? Come on, let's go. Well, up front, this is iconic BMW. The round headlights, and this model there was only one. Later on there were twin round headlights in the front. As we go towards the center, again the iconic kidney grille in the middle. And just compare it with today's modern BMWs. I mean, these are so slim and narrow, and today they're so big. How design has changed over time. Speaking of change over time, don't we all miss the shiny chrome front bumper? It's not possible in today's world with pedestrian safety regulations, but it just adds such a nice character. It's like the car is wearing some kind of a tie. Gives it so much of elegance. What do you guys think? Is this not a stunning car? Especially in this color. This is a very special original BMW color. Kind of makes it look like a little pumpkin. This car has classic automobile proportions. A long front bonnet, a tall cabin in the middle, and a long trunk at the back. Let's look at the side. Now we have this single line of chrome which starts all the way around and is an entire frame around the circumference of the car. These indicator lights also wrap around, as do the front bumpers. As we go further down the side, well, these two wheels are really small. I think they're about 9 or 11 inches maximum. It doesn't really say on the wheel, but really nice to see side walls, which you don't really see nowadays in modern cars. By the way, the front wheel has a disc brake and the back has a drum brake. So we go further down the side, again, very nice, straight, clean lines, another chrome strip down in the middle. And look at the size of this A-pillar, it's so thin. But hey, that gives such great visibility, although might not be the safest thing. Manually adjustable side rear view mirror, a two-door, because this is the 02 model type, and a nice sloping C-pillar, and finally leading to the long swooping rear trunk. As we saw in the front, even here in the back, it's all about simple, straight, clean lines and just these two round tail lamps. And again, back in the 70s, you could get away with things like this, having the brake light, reversing light, and the indicator light all in one little cluster. But hey, I think it's so charming. And a little button over there to pop open the trunk, a couple lights down here for illuminating the license plate, and a single exhaust at the back. Simple and elegant. Let's take a look in the trunk. There's the release button. You can also lock this. There's a separate key, in fact, for this particular lock. But anyway, just one button push, and there we go. Very simple, nothing too elaborate. There's no padding, there's no sound insulation. You can see the wheel arches right there. But honestly, this is such a vast, expansive place. It's flat, so you have a lot of place to load things. You can remove these floor panels, and you have a spare tire and a jack inside. Just to give you an idea, let's put in a suitcase. There we go. So as you can see, there's really quite a lot of space. You can't say that about today's modern two-door coupes now, can you? Here we have the keys, and I say keys plural because this one is for the door and the engine, this one is for the trunk, and I don't know what this one does yet. But of course there's no keyless entry, you do it the old-fashioned way. And voila, look at the door. It's a very long door, quite narrow, not much in the way of any padding as such. There's a little bit of padding over here on the door. It's a very simple design, straight lines, a armrest over here with the door release latch down there, and winders for the window, as well as a way for you to release the ventilator at the front. Such a cool little thing. As we look inside, well, simplicity is a way to describe this in one word. Very, very few things to get in the way of the task at hand, and that's all about driving. A thin 3-spoke steering wheel, a simple dashboard, not much frivolous about it at all. 2 bucket seats in the front. All right, let's get inside and take a closer look. Getting inside is not too bad because there's quite a lot of space on the inside. Again, there's not much in the way of a dashboard to really obstruct you, so you have a lot of space out in front of you. The seats are not the best, I would say. You're sitting quite low and your knee is really high off the seat. I'm 5'8" or 1.7 meters, so somebody who's taller, like Thomas, his knees would probably be touching the steering wheel. But the seat is adjustable. You can slide it forwards and backwards, and oops, don't tell I did that. But you can also recline the back of the seat. And let's not forget, you also have a mechanically winding sunroof. Honestly, I've been driving this car with the sunroof open, sitting back here with the thin A-pillars, this big, tall glass house, and the open sunroof. It's such a bright and happy experience. This is the instrument cluster. What you see is what you get. There is no touchscreen, there is no fancy things, there's no torque meters or anything. It's just 3 simple analog dials. Over here on the left, first of all, you have the lever to pull out, rather the tab for the headlights. This car also comes with a rear defogger, which is pretty cool. You have a fuel gauge, temperature gauge. This is the emergency parking brake warning light, a analog speedometer with a analog odometer, and it's very interesting. If you guys check it out, it says only 20,000 kilometers, and that's because this particular car was built with over 90% brand new old stock parts. So there's very few parts in this car which are original from 1971. So that's why the engine is all brand new, the transmission is brand new, and that's why it's just run 20,000 kilometers. Really cool. A analog tachometer over here. I don't know for the life of me what this does, but let's take a look at the steering wheel. In true 70s style, the steering wheel just has a very thin rim. You can barely even hold it tight. It's really thin and slim, and with just 3 spokes. This steering has no assistance whatsoever. There's no hydraulics assistance either. So you're gonna have to be doing a lot of working around with it. And I've noticed that your hands hit the edges of these very hard and sharp spokes, steel spokes, and it kind of gets a little bit painful after a while, but I think that's all part of the charm. You have a horn in the middle. This is the high beam pass flash for the lights. This is the indicator stalk, which would traditionally be on the other side. And there is only 1 speed for the windshield wipers. Here we have a small air conditioning, quote unquote, system. You can turn on the speed for the blower, and this is just normal air. And if you push it to the right, and I literally mean push it, it's not sliding, you have to put a bit of force, then it uses the heat from the engine to warm some coils of water, and that will then circulate some warmer air. I think that's how it works. If you know exactly how this works, put it down in the comments. I would also be interested in learning about that. There's a simple clock over there, and some storage spaces up here. Here we have a ashtray. Again, for the life of me, I have no idea what this button does. This is the hazard lights. There is a glove box over here and a large cubby hole down here. And this is the 4-speed manual. It's 1 and then 2 down this way, 3, 4, and you have to smack it really hard and up for reverse. And finally, here's the manual handbrake lever. All right, let's get into the back. There is a little switch which you can pull and tumble the seat forward. There is a place for you to grab onto as you clamber inside. Wow, the seat bench is also really low. There's a little light up here. But again, low seating position, knees are upright. There's the pouch in the seat back. Let's slide it back. Is it going to crush me? Well, not quite, but I don't have too much in the way of knee room. If I want to stretch my legs out, then yeah, it's a pretty tight place to be, but it's actually not that bad. I have a armrest over here and the all-essential cigarette ashtray as well. And with the sunroof open and these really tall windows and this low body line, it's so much more spacious and so much more bright. So I wouldn't be too angry sitting back here. I think I would be quite happy. Let's take a look inside the hood. We have a clamshell. Something about clamshells which just makes it so much more fun. And there's none of that silly plastic covering up the engine. You can see the exhaust manifold, you can see the headers, the radiator, and it's just so much more interesting to look into these things and learn about it. Anyway, the BMW 02 series was produced between 1966 and 1977. The 02 denotes that this was a two-door body type. You could either get it in a sedan version or a hatchback, and there was even a convertible. The first engine that was out with the 02 series was a 1.6 liter engine, which made 84 horsepower. It had carburetors, and this was denoted the 1602. Then later on, there was a 1802, which had a 1.8 liter engine. And then in 1971, the 2002, the 2.0 liter engine was introduced. And then the TII version, like the one we have here, has a mechanical fuel injection. This engine makes 130 horsepower. It's longitudinally mounted. It has 4 cylinders, and it goes through a 4-speed manual gearbox to rear-wheel drive. I'm going to start off the driving segment of today's episode by saying something that is a little bit weird, but give me a minute and I'll explain. Driving this car reminds me of driving my old motorcycle. AJ, how can a car be like a motorcycle? Let me explain. When I was 18, I had this small 200 motorcycle, completely analog. It had a cable-operated throttle, it had a cable-operated clutch. I could feel the throttle opening as I twisted, and I could feel the gear slotting into place with a nice clunk, and I could feel the clutch, and I could sense where it was biting. All these sensations are so important to you enjoy your drive. Not only that, this motorcycle of mine had also a drum brake in the rear with a mechanical linkage, so I could feel the pressure that I'm putting. It was so communicative. And not only that, the master cylinder for the front brake was right on top of the lever. Again, great feel. And then in a motorcycle, you're pretty much straddling the engine. It's sitting right below you, or rather you're sitting on top of it. And the vibrations and the heat and the G-forces and all these senses, it's a wholesome experience. You're communicating with the bike and the bike is communicating with you, and it's man and machine as one. And overall, it's a very kinesthetic learning experience, and I loved that old motorcycle of mine. And this car reminds me of that, because in today's modern world, you know, cars, pretty much all of them have throttle by wire, so there is no physical connection between the throttle pedal and the throttle in the engine manifold. And they're all, most of them at least offer automatic transmission. So they have adaptive cruise control, lane keeping assist. And for this as well, it's important to have a throttle by wire so that the engine can manage its speed irrespective of the position of the accelerator pedal. Then, earlier this year, I drove the Alfa Romeo Giulia Quadrifoglio on the Hockenheim Ring racetrack. You guys should check out that video, it's a good one. And in that car, there is a electronic braking system, rather a brake-by-wire system. Let me just execute this turn. Nicely done. So like I was saying, this car has a brake-by-wire system, which again means there's no physical connection between the brake pedal and the master cylinder. Then the Infiniti Q60S that I also drove earlier this year, check out that video as well. That car had a steering-by-wire system, which again means there's no physical connection between the steering wheel and the front wheels. Pretty soon, there's going to be a car which has all of these things. And then on the off chance that the car isn't driving itself, you don't really need a steering wheel or accelerator pedals or any of these traditional control interfaces. You might as well just control it with a PlayStation controller, one of those things that you get. Because, yeah, it's all just a digital interface. And of course, no vibrations, no sound, not traditionally, because your car is going to be electric anyway. So when the world is heading towards this, a lot of us car enthusiasts, we feel a bit scared, and it's natural to feel scared about these things. And in our little world, we worship cars, and we're straying further and further away from God. But driving this brings it all back. It's a religious experience. The steering, well, it's not even assisted. It's completely manual. There is no hydraulic assistance, electrical assistance, nothing. And I can feel what the wheels are doing. I know the amount of grip that it has. Then, this is a mechanical fuel-injected engine. So again, no turbochargers. I have an instant response when I put my foot down. The engine actually does something immediately. Then there's a really heavy, weighty clutch and a 4-speed manual transmission. I mean, this is just bare minimum. There's no extra frills. And this is what driving used to be all about. Just you connecting with the car and the car communicating with all of these physical sensations. And it's such a joyous experience. Of course, everything isn't peaches and rainbows inside here. This is an old car, so the steering wheel is quite loose in the center. There's a lot of play where nothing really happens. And while the thin A-pillars and the really tall glass and the short window line offers a beautiful overview and an outlook and great visibility, well, it's not really safe now, is it? In case of a crash, there is no crumple zone, there is no airbags, there is no ABS, traction control, there is no safety net for you to fall on. So if you make a mistake, you're going to pay the price. But on the other hand, because it's like this, it's like a greenhouse. It's so much of light, and on the outside this car feels, or rather looks really small, and it is quite compact. But inside it's fairly spacious. That's also thanks to very little padding on the doors and wider seats, and again, not much in the way of a dashboard either. It's just I have my instrument cluster and that's pretty much it. So there's so much of empty space all around, which really helps open up the interior of this car. But again, this brings down the amount of sound insulation available. So at higher speeds, this car is fairly loud. And again, it's the age which is showing for the most part, but this gearbox is not really the most cooperative, especially when I want to put it into third gear. It takes a little bit of manhandling, and so does the steering wheel at slow speeds since it's not assisted. But hey, you work hard and you get high rewards. But apart from that, let's see. I'm not going to review this car, I shouldn't. It's an old timer, or rather a young timer, but the seats are not that supportive. They're really squishy, so I haven't been driving for too long, but I can find myself fidgeting around quite a bit. And the placement of the pedals and the steering wheel is a bit awkward. I have to kind of bend my knees, and the seat is also quite low, so you can see that my knee comes up if I put it upright, so it's slightly an awkward seating position, especially compared to the cars that we get nowadays and what we're generally used to. And again, because of this gearbox, it's mandatory to do a blip of the throttle to rev match. Zwischengas, as they say in German. I think I got it right, did I? Is it Zwischengas? The blipping the throttle in between changing gears? Yeah, well, Michelle said it is, so I guess it is. Nearly. Almost there, almost there. My German is getting a little bit better. But yeah, like I was saying, it's a little bit awkward. Space in the back is not the best either. And there's not much of an armrest either. You can barely squeeze your elbow. If you're a little bit bigger than I am, it's going to keep falling off. And, you know, these small things might not make it comfortable, but when you're so involved and engaged in driving a car like this, you know, you don't even notice these things because you're focused on driving, and that's all that really matters, because it's a task and it has to be given respect. It has to be given its due amount of attention. So between all of these things, you know, it's not that hard to fall in love with vintage cars. And vintage cars are coming back in a big way. I was just talking to one of the PR guys at this event, and we had a really nice discussion. And he said that, you know, BMW Classic is finding more and more young customers who are interested in buying a car, a vintage car. And they don't want the traditional drawbacks that come with it. Finding these parts are always really hard, or, you know, maintaining them, or the engines keep breaking down. Nor do a lot of these new customers want to spend time working on the car themselves. The traditional vintage car enthusiast, you know, sort of by definition, is supposed to love working on these cars himself, spending months researching and finding those little parts to put into the car. And, you know, it's a story, it's a relationship, it's a bond that you build with a vintage car. But things are changing a little bit. People want to be able to go online, book spare parts, get it shipped overnight, and then have somebody put it in automatically, easily. They want to not have to worry about it after that. It should work, shouldn't break down, should give decent mileage. And all of these things are possible now, especially with BMW's classic, the division that they have for classic cars. They can supply so many spare parts. In fact, this car, 90% of all the spares used were brand new. They were either produced newly or they had new old stock left over. So very few things in this car are originally in the first car from back in 1971. They're all replaced with new cars, and that's why you can expect this car to drive and be as reliable as a modern BMW. Oh, almost, within reasonable amounts, and that's good enough, right? So it's really easy to see why vintage cars are so important and so nice to have. I mean, everybody has a smartphone, but how many people know how a smartphone works? Even if your car is, you know, you have a brand new car, how many people care about how the engines are working? They don't. But if you have a vintage car, it's all mechanical. There is no touch screen, there is no digital dashboard. It's just two gauges, your tachometer, your speedometer, and how much fuel is left. What else do you really need? And then you open the hood and you have real mechanical components, mechanical fuel injection, a 4-speed manual gearbox. It's all right there, and you can see how it's working. It's like an intricate watch. And yeah, when I have the money, I would probably go for one myself. And another thing about vintage cars is there's a story behind each and every one of them. You know, a new car doesn't have a story, but an old car definitely does. Who's owned it, where it's been, has it been in any crashes, or there's always something interesting about them. And that just makes the bond and the relationship between man and machine even better. So again, I don't want to review this car. I don't want to, you know, I want to do it justice for what it is, for what it represents. So yes, like I said, some things are not the best, and it is a bit woolly around the edges. Okay, a lot of the other guys in the rally want to overtake me, so let me just give them safe passage. Go ahead, guys. I don't want to race you. We have a lot of interesting cars here. I saw a couple of DeLoreans as well, so anyway, yeah, the suspension is a bit woolly around the edges, and because the steering is not that tight, if I go back and forth like this, you know, first of all, I don't know where the steering will actually start giving me a reaction, and it's the body tends to roll. A lot of vibrations in the steering wheel, a lot of vibrations in the gearbox. And there is an alarming smell of petrol in here as well, which is again part of the classic car culture, but for a guy like me who doesn't really have much experience with it, I was worried initially, like, hey, is there petrol leaking somewhere? And now you can see, I'm gonna pick up the pace a little bit. Let's see how it handles. At around 100, I have to really raise my voice for you to see that it's quite loud in here. But this also follows the philosophy of driving a slow car fast. There's so much more fun and more engagement to be had when you're really pushing a small, slow car to its maximum, rather than having a big, fast, heavy car and trying to restrain it, trying to control it, and holding on for dear life. There's no fun in that. This is a lot more engaging because I'm really working with the car and pushing it, and I'm pushing myself to see how far I can go, and I'm still very reasonably in safe speed limits. And this car is also really lightweight, and it really shows. You don't need to have big tires because you have plenty of grip with the narrow tires that this car already has. And again, there's no airbags, there's not a lot of sound insulation, there's none of that kind of stuff to add all that extra weight. So overall, this BMW 1971 2002 Tii is a gem, and I'm starting to fall in love with it. I know I gave a nice little conclusion to the previous moderation, but I couldn't help myself because I want to just push this car a little bit and see how it handles. Well, I wish the steering was a little bit tighter because this woolliness doesn't really give me the best confidence. Suspension is also a bit floaty on these bumpy streets, and I see this in a lot of old movies that, when there's this chase scene, the car driver's always doing this. And I can see totally why now, because there's no effect. You might as well keep doing this. But yeah, 130 horsepower, the mechanically fuel injected engine. This M10 block is actually a really good block. It was used later on even with the turbo, as well as the F1 car, which had, I think horsepower upwards of 800. So it had a lot to give. And of course, this is not, it had a lot of modifications in those engines, but this is a very powerful block. And 130 horsepower might not seem a lot, but the power band is relatively, in the mid section of the RPM range. So you get power and torque low down, and then it just climbs and climbs. It does taper off towards the end, but being a 4-speed, it still reaches speeds of around 180 kilometers per hour. So in 4th gear at 3,000 RPM, look at that, whoa, quite a lot of body roll. But yeah, in 4th gear at around 3,000 RPM, you're already at motorway speeds. So a very capable car. I'm here with Mr. Manfred Grunert, the head of archives and collection at BMW Group Classic. Thank you so much for taking time to talk to me today. So what is so special about the BMW 02 series, which was so important to the history of BMW?
I mean, when you look at the history of that car, it came out in '66, right at the day of the 50th anniversary of the whole company. Mm-hmm. And before, up to '59, we were in a deep crisis, and the BMW 700 helped us out of the crisis together with the Zeta somehow, and especially with the new class 1500, 1800, and BMW 2000. So, and then the whole company was discussing, what we're doing with the 700. What do we have a predecessor, something like that? And then the company decided that they just will ask the customers and make a customer journey and say, okay, what is your typical BMW? What is what you want to have as a BMW? And most of them said, yeah, the BMW I can remember is the 328. And they were really like, wow, why 328? A car which was only produced 454 times and so on, since 25 years out of production. And said, okay, it's somehow the character of that car. It has very sporty, but also compact. And then they say, okay, this is now what we want to make a sedan like a little bit. and then the O2 series came out, and it was so everyone was involved from beginning on, not only production, not only development, also sales and marketing, and that's why it's so important for the company. And on the other hand, and that's what quite clear, it was Isetta was 165,000 roughly. The 700 was 180,000 times sold, and the O2 series 850,000 times sold. So with the O2 series, the whole company exploded, and that's why, for me personally, it's up to now one of the most important cars in our history.
Well, this car itself is also very important, and this is a 2002, a TII from 1971. And what is special about this car? Because I hear that this was renovated, or rather, what's the word? Restored. There we go. Restored back in 2006, using 90% replacement parts from old stock.
Yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit more about this?
Yeah, I mean, at that time we began to renovate our museum, and we had a spare museum near the Olympic Tower in the Olympic Park in Munich. So we had a little collection, a little museum, and then we got the idea, say, okay, we have a little bit more space, and why don't we do a kind of workshop out of glass where the people can watch what we're doing inside. That was the first one, and then the second one was, but then we have to do a special car, and it should be a 2 Series. And then the colleagues from the spare parts service said, you don't have to buy one. We can build one together with the spare parts. Say no, and the guys who were responsible at that time couldn't believe, and then actually they began with it, they did it. And the funny thing was, when we went to the government in Munich and want to have a historic number plate, you have to have some. It must be that kind of over at that time 25 years old. Nowadays it's 30 years old. So they went there, the colleagues, and want to have that number plate with the age, like historic car. And the guy said, no, we also read the newspaper, and we see that the car is per 90% new. You don't get an age on the plate. And first of all, we were quite, they couldn't understand, but now I think it's the only O2 series without an H on the number plate, and everyone knows, that's the car from the from the body shop out of glass. And that one, that workshop out of glass also inspired us for our new workshop at BMW Group Classic, to make it not fully out of glass, but that people can watch, because we mentioned at that time when we did that car that people were so interested in seeing people working manual, doing craftsmanship somehow. That's why the car is so important, or different to any other O2 series, I think.
Yeah, and while I was driving, I was also saying, craftsmanship is something that was so important and integral in all these cars of this era.
Yeah.
And people appreciate that. Like even today when we were driving around, people stop and look at it, they smile, they give you a wave. So it's really brings a lot of joy, just on its own, standing here. So what if one of our viewers out there, wants to get involved and wants to buy a car, from this era? How can BMW Group Classic assist them? Do you sell ready-made cars, or do you assist them in buying, restoration? How can they get in touch, and how can they expect support?
First of all, we don't have a showroom concept, I would call that. So there's no showroom where you can go in and 20 cars are in and say, I want this one or that one. But you can contact us via email, telephone, whatever. And then we support you however we can. That means you have a car and you need a service, or you have a car and say, I don't know, is it okay? Then we can inspect the car in different degrees. But also, I don't have a car, I'd like to have a O2 series, can you help me? And then we offer you some cars, saying, okay, this one must be like that one needs a restoration or something like that. We make the restoration as well, if you like to. So we make it from the dream until we give you the key. We make everything possible that we can. But there is no showroom where we do that. But the colleagues who are doing that job, they always have so many cars in their mind and on their table. So just contact us, and we're really happy to help you to find a car like that.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Manfred.
Thank you for your time.
Very beautiful car, and I'll see you again.
Yeah, and I wish you driving pleasure.
I had a great time this past couple of days at the Creme 21 Youngtimer Rally, driving this beautiful 1971 BMW 2002 Tii. I learned so much about how a car behaves and how it handles, and it was a kinesthetic learning experience. I think a vintage car is going to really teach you the pure essence of driving, and I think it's something that everybody should experience. It's a car that you drive with your heart. So let us know, do you have a vintage car? Because every vintage car has a story behind it. Share yours, put it down in the comments below. And thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.